Hello and welcome. Today my co-host and I, Julia Lewis, will be discussing various psychological experiments with results similar and different to the Jonestown Massacre. So first we wanted to cover what the Jonestown Cult Massacre was. On November 18, 1978, cult leader Jim Jones instructed all members living in the Jonestown compound in South America to commit an act of revolutionary suicide by drinking poisoned punch. In all, 918 people died that day, nearly a third of whom were children. Founded in 1956 by Jim Jones, the temple was a racially integrated church that focused on helping people in need. Jones originally established the temple in Indianapolis, Indiana, but then moved to Redwood Valley, California in 1966. Jones had this vision of a communist community, one in which everyone lived together in harmony and worked for the common good. He was able to establish this to a small scale, while in California, he dreamed of establishing a compound outside of the United States. This compound would be fully under his control and be far away from any influence of the United States government. Conditions at the compound in South America became very poor and strenuous on the members of the cult. A U.S. Representative, Leo Ryan, heard about this and went down to the compound and offered to take anyone who wanted to leave back to America. This resulted in Leo Ryan and 5 others being shot by members of the cult. Jones was in a panic after Leo Ryan's death and told everyone that the only way to escape punishment by the American government was to commit a revolutionary suicide. Almost none of the members protested against this idea, and they drank the poison. Each person was dead within 5 minutes, leaving 912 people dead. 276 of them were children. Jones died of a gunshot wound to the head, but it is unclear if he did this to himself or not. Now you will hear from Julia about some experiments that were similar and different to the psychological results relating to the Jonestown Massacre.
Hello everyone, this is Julia Lewis reporting on the Solomon Asch line experiment. Solomon Asch set up this experiment to test the extent to which social pressure from a majority group could affect a person to conform. For this experiment, one person was used. He or she was placed into a room with a group of others that were in on the experiment and carefully scripted to see the effect of the groups. Asch used a lab experiment to study conformity, where 50 male students from Swarthmore College in the USA participated in a vision test, using a line judgment task. Asch put an unknowing participant in a room with 7 people who knew what was going on. There were 4 lines placed on a chalkboard. One was the target line, and the others were labeled A, B, and C. They were called comparison lines. Each person in the room had to state aloud which comparison line, A, B, or C, was most like the target line. The answer was always obvious. The real participant sat at the end of the row and gave his or her answer last. During critical trials, where some or all of the knowing participants gave the incorrect answer. During these trials, the participant faced cognitive dissonance because they knew the correct answer but were tempted to conform with the others. On average, 32% of people placed in the experiment as the unknowing participant conformed to the incorrect answer given by the others. 75% conformed at least once, and 25% didn't conform at all. It's absolutely fascinating how a group can influence individuals. Now to Fiona Gaynor, who will be reporting on the Stanford Prison.
Hello everyone, this is Fiona Gaynor back with a fascinating story about a recent psychological experiment done called the Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment was a psychology experiment that was designed to study the psychological impact of becoming a prison guard or prisoner. 24 college-age males were chosen to participate out of the many who volunteered, and they were promised a pay of $15 a day, as the study would occur for a span of 2 weeks. The boys were either chosen to be a guard or a prisoner, and they were assigned to remain in that role throughout the entire experiment. However, they were told that they could leave the experiment at any point if they wanted to. The aim of Zimbardo's experiment was to see how the participants would react when placed in a prison environment. The first day of the experiment was uneventful, but day 2, the situation inside the makeshift prison had begun to get different. A riot broke out, and some of the prisoners barricaded themselves inside their cells, rebelling against the guards. The guards used fire extinguishers to break themselves inside the cells and implant various psychological tactics as a way of regaining control of the prison, such as solitary confinement, embarrassment, and increased aggression. By the end of about 36 hours, one of the prisoners was already experiencing a mental breakdown and was eventually forced to be released. The 2-week experiment was stopped abruptly at only 6 days because of the mental harm that the experiment was causing on most of the boys. Zimbardo realized how greatly role-playing can affect attitudes. The boys in the experiment, including Zimbardo himself, became so engrossed and committed to their roles that they were assigned that they adopted the said attitudes, whether that be an aggressive guard or rebellious prisoner. This experiment was deemed unethical because of the emotional and mental harm it had on the participants. However, it did teach us a great deal about the human mind and behaviors. The factors observed in this experiment were similar and at the same time different compared to some of the characteristics of the Jonestown cult massacre. A similarity being, when the cult members were told that they could leave, they were too scared to, and they thought they would upset their leader. And when the prisoners were told they could leave, they hesitated because they didn't want to upset the others and be seen as a bad prisoner. However, the prisoners did try to rebel against the guards, while most of the members of the cult behaved and listened to their leaders.
Hello everyone, I'm back with information on a recently done psychological study at Yale University. This experiment was called the Stanley Milgram Shock Experiment, done by Milgram himself. The study focused on conflicts between obedience to authority and personal morals. It was designed to see if the excuse of following orders during events such as the Holocaust was applicable. During this experiment, 40 males from the ages of 20 to 50, ranging from unprofessional to professional, were picked from the New Haven area and paid $4.50 just for showing up. Straws were drawn to decide who would be the learner, who was supposed to learn a set of words, or the teacher, who was told to shock the learner every time he got a set of words incorrect. Although this was always fixed, and someone who was in on the experiment was always the learner. Straws were only drawn to make participants think who played what role was random. There were 2 rooms set up, one with an electric chair, and the other with a board displaying a series of electric shocks that were increasingly strong. This was attached to the electric chair. The learner was strapped into the chair, and the teacher, along with the experimenter, went into the room with the electrical board. As the learner got answers incorrect and shocks were administered, the teacher was instructed by the experimenter to make them stronger, and as the shocks got stronger, a fake yell was played. The teacher was always told to continue even if the shock could seriously injure someone. Whether or not someone continued or not was what Milgram wanted to know. 65% of participants continued all the way up to the highest shock of 450, and all the participant continued until 300 volts. Participants in the experiment were placed in a situation where cognitive dissonance played a huge role, because they knew they were hurting another human but were also afraid to defy authority. This experiment was important to test the authority and how easily people can conform to it. Now, signing off from the Cougar News, I hope you enjoyed our psychology special. Have a great night.